On November 4, 2025, the United States Supreme Court delivered a decision that sent shockwaves through every corner of the nation. The air outside the marble halls was thick with anticipation, as millions waited for a verdict that would shape the country's future. In a landmark ruling, the court struck down President Trump's use of emergency powers to impose sweeping tariffs, fundamentally redefining the limits of presidential authority. The justices, after months of deliberation, made it clear that even the highest office in the land is bound by the Constitution. The case, brought by a coalition of American businesses, posed a critical question: can a president unilaterally impose massive tariffs as a form of tax, bypassing Congress? The court's answer was resounding: no. The ruling emphasized that such sweeping economic measures require legislative approval, not just executive action. This decision marks a historic rebalancing of power between Congress and the presidency, reaffirming the system of checks and balances at the heart of American democracy. Lawmakers from both parties acknowledged the significance of the moment, recognizing its impact on the separation of powers. For months, the country was locked in a bitter struggle over the president's aggressive trade policies, which many businesses saw as a devastating tax. Across the nation, small business owners, workers, and families felt the pressure as prices soared and uncertainty grew. The legal battle reached the Supreme Court, setting the stage for a constitutional showdown that would be watched by the world. The courtroom was packed, the arguments fierce, and the stakes higher than anyone could remember in recent history. President Trump, defiant as ever, warned that a ruling against him would cripple America's ability to compete globally. He argued that strong executive action was necessary to protect American jobs and industries in an increasingly competitive world. The stakes were enormous: over $90 billion in tariffs, the livelihoods of countless Americans, and the very future of executive power. International markets watched nervously, aware that the outcome could reshape global trade. The ruling challenges the administration's entire trade strategy and could trigger the largest government refund in U.S. history. Economists scrambled to predict the fallout, while government agencies braced for a wave of refund claims and policy reversals. The shockwave has just hit, and the aftershocks are only beginning. Across the country, Americans are left to wonder what comes next, as the balance of power and the rules of the game have changed overnight. At the center of a legal battle that would capture the nation's attention was the case of Learning Resources, Inc. versus Trump. The heart of the dispute revolved around a powerful law, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. This law, passed in 1977, was designed to give presidents the ability to respond quickly to foreign threats, but with clear limits. For decades, IEEPA allowed presidents to freeze assets, block transactions, and impose targeted sanctions on foreign adversaries. It was never meant to be a blank check for sweeping economic action. Instead, it was a tool for measured, specific responses, never for broad tariffs that could reshape the entire U.S. economy. But in 2019, the Trump administration took a bold step. They argued that IEEPA's emergency powers gave the president authority to impose tariffs on nearly all imports from a foreign country during a declared national emergency, dramatically expanding the law's reach. Businesses and legal experts pushed back. They argued that tariffs are, at their core, a form of taxation. And under the Constitution, the power to tax and regulate commerce belongs to Congress alone, not the president. If a president could use IEEPA to impose nationwide tariffs, critics warned, it would erase Congress's most fundamental power and upset the careful balance of government set by the founders. The administration, however, insisted that in times of economic crisis, the nation needs a president who can act swiftly and decisively without waiting for Congress to debate or delay. Lower courts reviewed the arguments and ultimately sided with the businesses. They concluded that Congress never intended IEEPA to grant the president the sweeping authority to impose tariffs on his own. Now, the Supreme Court faced a momentous question. Does a president's emergency power override the Constitution's clear separation of powers, or must the executive branch respect the limits set by Congress? The court's answer would not only resolve this case, but also define the boundaries of presidential authority for generations to come, shaping the future of American democracy. President Trump declared America's massive trade deficit a national emergency, unlocking IEEPA's powers. In April 2024, his administration imposed tariffs of 10% to 50% on imports from around the world. The goal: make foreign goods more expensive, boost U.S. manufacturing, and force better trade deals. The tariffs were both a domestic intervention and a weapon in global negotiations. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent called them a permanent economic emergency measure. The message: America would use its economic might to demand new, favorable trade terms. For Trump, these tariffs were not an abuse of power, but a vital tool to restore American strength. The move redefined the rules of global commerce and ignited fierce opposition at home. Opposition to the tariffs united small businesses, major corporations, and lawmakers from both parties. Their argument: the president had usurped Congress's exclusive power to tax. Thousands of U.S. companies suddenly faced billions in new taxes, imposed without debate or a vote. Lawsuits argued IEEPA was being used as a loophole to bypass Congress. Over 200 Democratic lawmakers and several Republicans joined the legal challenge. The Senate passed bipartisan resolutions rejecting the president's use of emergency powers for tariffs. States filed briefs citing economic harm to their citizens. The fight was about more than money. It was about defending the constitutional balance of power. While legal battles raged, the tariffs hit American businesses and families hard. By September 2024, the government had collected $90 billion in new tariffs. Small and medium businesses faced catastrophic costs, some paying millions more than the year before. Many had to choose between absorbing losses or raising prices for consumers. The tariffs added to inflation, raising prices on everything from electronics to food. Supply chains were thrown into chaos, forcing companies to scramble for alternatives. Some considered moving operations abroad or reshoring at great expense. The uncertainty and disruption left a deep scar on the American economy. The tariffs were central to the Trump administration's global trade strategy. They were used as leverage to force new deals with countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, and even China. A fragile truce with China paused further escalation, while a tentative deal with the EU was put on hold, awaiting the Supreme Court's decision. These agreements depended on the president's tariff authority. With the court's ruling, the legal foundation for these deals has crumbled. Nations may now seek to renegotiate or abandon agreements made under threat of tariffs. The truce with China could unravel, and the EU deal is in jeopardy. The administration's gamble on executive power has backfired, plunging global trade into uncertainty. The world is watching as America's trade relationships are thrown into chaos. In a landmark 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court delivered a powerful message, ruling against the Trump administration's use of emergency powers to impose sweeping tariffs. The decision sent shockwaves through Washington, signaling a dramatic shift in the interpretation of presidential authority. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the majority, made it clear: the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, does not give the president the sweeping authority to levy broad tariffs on imports. The court emphasized that such economic decisions require clear, specific authorization from Congress, not just a vague invocation of emergency. The justices reaffirmed that the power to tax and regulate trade is a fundamental responsibility of Congress. This authority, they said, cannot be handed over to the executive branch through loosely worded emergency laws. The ruling reestablishes the constitutional separation of powers at a critical moment. As a result, the tariffs imposed under the disputed order are now illegal. The government is required to refund more than $100 billion to businesses that were affected, an unprecedented move that will have ripple effects across the economy. For federal agencies, this means a massive logistical and financial challenge. Processing refunds on such a scale is daunting, and the ruling stands as a sharp rebuke to the administration's approach to executive power. The decision now compels the White House to engage directly with Congress on trade policy, ending years of unilateral action. Negotiations and compromise will be necessary to shape future economic policy. While alternative emergency laws exist, they offer only limited and temporary powers. Each comes with its own legal hurdles and is unlikely to provide the sweeping authority once claimed by the executive branch. For American businesses, the ruling brings immediate relief and a significant financial windfall. Yet, it also introduces new uncertainty, as companies must now navigate a changing landscape of trade policy and government oversight. Congress, emboldened by the court's decision, is poised to reassert its constitutional authority over trade. Lawmakers are already discussing new legislation to clarify the limits of executive power and restore balance. The balance of power in Washington has shifted. As the nation watches, a new chapter in American governance begins, one defined by renewed checks and balances, and a reinvigorated role for Congress in shaping the country's future.